Lauren comes to film.
You know what?
Embarrassed.
Great. Yeah. Why are you on your tiptoe? At 9:50. That's perfect.
Why are you so aggressive?
So nervous. Oh, for sure.
Oh, what's your excuse?
I was just
The other
scared she's
99%
closer. She closes at like 3 or 4. You know. Yeah, but she's definitely on time. I want
Is that the best way to do it?
No, but I just
I know.
What?
Try sometimes, but fine.
You want your
Chairs don't recline, I'm sure to say so. It's better than. No, I did. Yeah, well, I don't know. She got married.
Great, we can.
I don't care.
Give it another minute or so.
Whoa. We spent the weekend together since. We did it
Of course.
I got it.
Maybe I had just the right amount. Just south of that. Yeah. I don't like it. What? You want a donut?
No. 4 times. We're here for the comfort.
There we go. All right.
I can see this.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the 2017 ISP presentations. We have 2 in store for you today. Hallie and John are going to go first. They did a dual project, and then Abukun is going to follow. And so without further ado, ladies.
My name is Jenna Gleason. I started to write poetry the spring term of my junior year, So this year I decided to collaborate with my friend Allie.
Hi, I'm Allie, and for my portion of our ISP, I explored different subjects in photography. I've been taking photos since my first camera when I was 13 years old, and over the course of my years at Westover, my passion grew and it became something that I want to include in my future.
We created a syllabus to show the committee during our interview. We plan to write a book with about 8 poems over the course of the term and edit 2 old poems for a total of 10.
The title of our book, Serendipity, came about because it was a happy accident that our passions seemed to correspond.
All was well until I got super excited and wrote 13 new poems and edited 6 old poems. The 4th week of our project was definitely the most stressful. Up until that point, Allie and I both felt like we had everything together. Then we realized we had to send in the book to be printed in less than a week.
There are definitely struggles that come with trying to meld together 2 art forms that are so different. When I began, I thought that I always had an image in my head when I read a poem, but this is not the case. Poems are interpretive and of course always have imagery in them, but a lot of the time the imagery that I had in my head had nothing to do with the true purpose of the poem. But when we finally found the perfect match, it was a satisfying and very proud moment.
So our book went from a total of 10 poems in 10 weeks to a total of 19 poems during less than 5 weeks of classes.
And the project took a lot of working together, but it also took a lot of independent work, which was nice because we both, in a way, had separate ISPs that came together in the end.
So we're going to show you some slides from the book. Our first one is still here. We put this poem first because it was the first poem that I've written that was not turned in as a mandatory lantern assignment. I wrote this and showed Mr. Coffin's spring term in my junior year. So this one's called Still Here. 7 years later, your black peacoat still hangs in the closet by the door. I thought I threw away the last of you long ago, but pieces of you are still fastened to me. Your words are tattooed in my heart, down my hip and up my spine, like wooden landmarkers littered around an old country mansion to keep intruders out and secrets in. My pen floats on the back of old receipts before I know what I'm writing, as tears seal the envelopes and stamp them goodbye, until I run out of addresses, paper, or apologies, whichever's comes sooner. So when I wrote this, I was thinking about memories and how they never truly vanish. You don't just forget people when they leave. They stay with you forever.
So this photo was inspired by the part of the poem that says, "Pieces of you are still fastened to me," and down my hip and up my spine. I decided to write the direct quotation from the poem onto my model's back because it corresponds with the word fastened, because it's as though the words are fastened to her back. While reading this poem, I got kind of a cold and desolate feeling, so I tried to mimic that in the photo through cooler lighting. This particular photo is one that I'm most proud of because I appreciate bodyscapes, and the curve of the words that go along with the curve of her back makes this particular bodyscape unique from others that I have done.
So our next slide is inspired by a book I'm sure a lot of you read, Milk and Honey by Ruby Carr. I really liked the idea of poems that were short and sweet, yet told a strong story. So this one's I Might Move the Keys. I'm not sure when we switch from handshake and polite formalities to the keys are in the flower pot. I might move the keys. Sometimes relationships form at a steady speed, but the relationship in this poem moves so quickly that it was frightening for the person. Should you risk trying to slow things down because you're not sure, or should you let things progress out of fear that you might lose it all?
So this was one of my most difficult poems, and I think it was because it was a short one, and it seemed like when I first read it that it only had one visual in it, but this isn't the case. I interpreted this one as a relationship that had gotten too serious for the writer, and the writer seems indecisive, and this is why I went to the "he loves me not" flower game. This photo was taken in my driveway, and I think that the lighting is the best element in this photo. The sun was sort of getting lower in the sky, and this time is called the golden hour, and I think it's the best time for photographic light. I'm sorry. This poem needed me to take the time to explore it and think about it, and there's so much more to it than meets the eye.
So our next slide is Below Decks. This is one of my favorite poems that I've ever written. Below Decks. I've spent half my life sitting on docks, watching the sun untangle itself from the sky and shrink away behind the flyaway clouds before night settles in like a navy blanket to tuck us back into bed with a clean slate and clean sheets, so I can still greet the thin, ghostly 4 a.m. mist that relaxes me all the way back to 3 Captain Morgan rums and 2 slices of wine over half a handful of ice. mixed together like an addiction I'd never want you to taste, in fear that it would tint your lips a new shade of honey. Toxic enough to chill my skin like your frigid fingers resting on my bare waist. Sometimes I invite discomfort in for a long wrangle about the trade winds, but other times I wish it away to any distant harbor until I feel like a refugee stowing away in my own shadow, waiting for your stamp of approval so I can come back within your hold. So this is probably the most revised poem that I've ever written. My family travels to Cape Cod about 8 times a summer, but we only stay for 2 or 3 days each time. On one of those trips, I was kidding around in the car with my siblings, and I started a poem. I spent half my life sitting in the car, and then once we got to Cape Cod, I changed it to I spent half my life sitting on docks, and used that as my fall-term lantern, and called it my ocean. And it was only about 6 lines, and I took those and transformed it into this poem.
So reading this poem, I immediately pictured a dock on a summer night, but this was only part of the imagery from the whole poem, so I had to take it a step further with the hip photo. The hip photo was inspired by the line "frigid fingers resting on my bare waist," and I think the two photos are a good match because they create a balance between human object and scenery.
So our next slide is treasures. Allie is going to explain first because this spread is a bit different than the others. The poem was inspired by the photo, which is called Ekphrasis.
So this photo was taken in my little town called Catawba that I just moved to in North Carolina. It's an antique shop that was really overcrowded with a lot of unique little trinkets, and I think the strongest aspect of this photo is the color as well as the chaos and lack of negative space, because your eye isn't really sure where to go, so it makes the viewer look at the photo longer. This is my favorite photo that I've ever taken, and I knew I wanted to use this one in the book, so Jenna wrote a poem called Treasures that was inspired.
So this one's called Treasures. You travel 784 miles away from our old rustic mansion, hidden by trees and cows grazing in Litchfield County, to visit a little transfer station. I've tried to tell you, no matter how many miles you wander, trash is still trash. You've brought back everything we don't need. License plates with no numbers that never win the lottery, signs for no parking that everyone ignores, ads for a painless dentist or Yankee Girl tobacco, trinkets like a purple potato head or a monkey spinning under a tree, a red hat I can promise you'll never see me wearing in public, a strand of blue beads you said we could use to play the rosary, and empty bottles of Cobra beer. This time, you returned home with an elaborate story that took the entire drive home to create. Something about magic and 3 wishes. A puzzle with 1,000 pieces about places we both knew would never get mapped together. And you brought me the key to happiness. I bet it unlocks a post office box or a child's first diary, so she can learn to spell love and hide her early secrets away.
Okay, so the next poem or slide that we're going to show you is Your Cigarette.
This poem was a great challenge for me because I've had the idea for a while now. Wasn't quite sure how to approach it. I want to write a poem from a different point of view, so I tried a sidewalk, a journal, and a pair of red rain boots, none of which even made the slightest bit of sense. So all 3 poems mentioned a cigarette, so I took it as a sign and wrote this poem as if I were a cigarette. So it's a little strange. So it's called Your Cigarette. I'm the virulent habit you can't seem to quit, but I demand more time than your bathroom break from Register 7 at the local Stop and Shop. When you dangle me from your lower lips, words slurred from your nicotine tongue, to light me up until your boss called out, and you'd have to throw me back into the dirt with everything else you've used or gotten tired of playing with, but you'll still crave the rebellious feeling of holding me between your fingers. 1 long breath is all it takes. I'm already flowing through your veins, poisoning your bloodstream with my silly affection, made of carcinogens, tobacco, and nicotine, halfway to your head and already flooding your lungs. We both know I could stop your heart at any second, or make you feel more alive and real than ever before. You could try to forget me, to give me up for Lent, but that emptiness nestled in the bottom of your stomach, that's not hunger, that's a vacancy only I can fill. So when I was writing this poem, I was trying to understand what it would be like to love, or rather to be addicted to something so dangerous that you would rather die than live without it.
So the poem is written from the point of view of the cigarette, so I thought I should focus solely on the cigarette in my photos. So the first photo, as Caleb explained to me, that it shows the cigarette more detached from the person because I sort of cut off the photo right at her wrist. And then the second photo displays the cigarette as left behind or forgotten, much like the cigarette portrayed in the poem.
So our last slide is called Footsteps. We decided to end our presentation with the first slide that we made.
We often go on walks at White Memorial Nature Center, and I like to take pictures on our walks.
After one of our walks during winter exam week, I got the idea to write a poem about some footsteps we saw, and in the car, Allie mentioned that one of her photos would go really well with it.
And later that day, we were talking and decided to try and collaborate sometime in our lives.
An opportunity knocked on our door. Well, rather, we got an email from Ben advertising senior independent projects.
And then we used this photo and this poem to apply for the ISP and present our ideas to our advisors and to Ben.
So this one's called Footsteps. I tried to fill the I tried to step into the outline of your rugged, probably untied Timberland boots, while the hurricane effaces your trail, before I can get close enough to see your shadow, like an old road map telling me which direction to turn. Somewhere, a few lefts back, maybe on Salisbury Hill or Hall's Lane, I began to measure distance in birch trees, and ounces of water settled between my toes and my wool socks, and to pass time by arguing with myself about whether periwinkle is more purple or blue. I kept walking to see the snow turn to slush and the weeds push through the cracks of the dirt until I'm far ahead of your last tracks and already halfway to spring.
So I interpreted this poem as someone following someone else's footsteps through the woods. And I thought that the ice photo went well with that poem. And the ice photo was taken during one of our walks. As well as the more obvious sort of imagery that I had, I also pictured a map. And this map photo was actually taken in Italy when I was 14. My mom and I were lost in Tuscany looking at a map, and I took this photo of her hand.
So now that we've come a full circle from where we started, there are a few people we'd like to thank.
I'd like to thank my advisor, Mary, for always supporting me in my photographs and for always brainstorming with me when I was truly stuck on a poem and didn't know what to do. This project would not have been a success without you, and I really appreciate every moment you dedicated to helping me.
And Mr. Coffin, thank you for all that you've done throughout this project. You have really taught me everything that I know about poetry.
I also want to thank Caleb Portfolio for being the best photo teacher I could ask for. I would not be where I am in photography without you, and I owe my success in my photographs to you. Thank you for always challenging me, dishing my sass right back to me, and training me to take the time to see ordinary things in new perspectives.
Kate Joyce, thank you for helping me so much this year, especially with the project. As Allie said, thank you for keeping me sane, which was well put.
And finally, thank you to my collaborator and friend, Jenna, for always dealing with my stubbornness and sticking with me through all the hours of panic we went through, especially toward the end when we realized we had 1 week to finish. We pulled it off, and I'm proud to have worked with you.
Allie, thank you for putting up with my charts, panic, organization, and hundreds of to-do lists. This truly was an amazing experience, and we both learned so much. I'm so proud to have your pictures next to my poems and your friendship. So does anyone have any questions or comments or anything?
Okay, thank you so much for coming, and also we wanted to remind everyone that we're placing another order for our book soon, so please fill out the form.
Questions? Okay. All right. Thanks, ladies. All right, we've got a little scene change with our technical setup, so give us a moment. so now our second presentation is Luke.
Hi, this is my ISP. It's about Black students and African American students in boarding schools and how we can improve their experience here.
Information about me is that my parents are Nigerian immigrants. I've lived in New York City my whole life, and I've went to schools that, for the most part, had students who were either Black, Hispanic, or Asian. So the focus of my independent senior project is learning about the Black or African Americans' student experience in boarding school.
Why is that so low?
Everyone's experiences are different. I'm opening up a narrative that is not heard enough.
Could we
Black
remind you
students
that
attending private institutions deserve to have a chance to make their voices and opinions heard. Okay, let's begin. And I went to schools that, for the most part, had students who were either Black, Hispanic, or Asian. So the focus of my independent senior project is learning about the Black or African Americans' student experience in boarding school. A Black or Westover gives its students opportunities to showcase things they've learned outside of the traditional classroom experience. For a while, I had been struggling to find an outlet to do a project such as this, and I'm glad that I'm doing it. There are several reasons why I ultimately decided to take on a project like this. One is for myself. I've grown since my freshman year at Westover. I'm not the same shy, timid Black girl I was 4 years ago. I think that this project is a testament to the experiences I've had attending a private boarding school. 2, to educate. Everyone's experiences are different. I'm opening up a narrative that is not heard enough. Black students attending private institutions deserve to have a chance to make their voices and opinions heard. Okay, let's begin. So I decided to make a list of everything I struggled with my freshman year. Assimilation. I remember feeling completely out of place at Westover. Once it became clear to me that I wasn't going to make friends during the first 2 weeks of school, I decided to assimilate. It was an out-of-body experience. I remember crying every night when I went to bed. I just didn't feel myself. But now, as I'm thinking about it, I think a major reason for this was because there wasn't really anyone I felt comfortable enough with to share my feelings with, and diversity numbers back then were really low. The transition from living in a lower middle class neighborhood to an affluent, predominantly white suburban setting was also something I wasn't ready for. I received microaggressions from teachers and students, such as, Ibuhun, can you read this African piece of music for me? Can I touch your nappy hair? Do you live in the US? Are you on financial aid? Do you hear gunshots where you live? I was one of 2 Black girls in my grade freshman year, and although it was nice to see Jolie Brown, she wasn't in any of my classes. In all my classes freshman year, I was the only person of color. I also wished I had the assurance of knowing that I truly belonged at Westover by at least having seen some faculty of color. So before I go on with my ISP, I owe many thanks to people who have stimulated my growth mentally, physically, and spiritually. So thank you, Tiffany Villacrez, for uplifting with me and growing with me since day 1. I don't think I could be where I am without you. Jojo Carenzi and Sydney Carlo, thank you for being friends I can confide in and share my worries with. And thank you to Jubilee Sandoval, Leah Proctor, Sophia Yanes, and Dulcinea Tuza. I love diversity. It is something that I've grown to embrace and something that I believe is beneficial to schools. Having different narratives, different people, and different stories allows us to build empathy with one another. I've been to events such as the Student Diversity Leadership Conference, or SDLC, and the People of Color Conference, POCC, and they're really uplifting. This past December, I had the opportunity to attend the National SDLC Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, and I will honestly never forget the time I had there. There are about 5,000 students from private boarding and day schools all across the country. I made friends there, and most of all, I bonded with so many people. One major lesson SDLC teaches us is to listen to others. Not just hearing what they say, but internalizing it and building up our empathy for one another. I remember when we split up into our different affinity groups, which are groups that you identify with. SDLC split us up into ethnicities. At the African American affinity group, it was a bittersweet moment. It surprised me how many of us had similar experiences in our schools. People cried, people spoke beautiful poetry, and we danced and sung. SDLC taught me that it is possible, that I am not alone in my struggle to give not only African Americans, but also people of color better and more wholesome experiences in their schools. It made me determined to keep fighting and keep pushing. Here are a few highlights of my time at SDLC. Events like SDLC, I believe, are beneficial to all. Throughout the day, you're put through a whirlwind of emotions. However, it feels good to have safe spaces with people similar to you and you've had similar experiences with. I felt like I could be myself. I think events like SDLC and TLCC should be a part of boarding school curriculum. School is more than just the core subjects and sports. It's also about the people and the interactions you have with the people different from you. The National Association of Independent Schools, or NAIS, on its website says it is a nonprofit membership association that provides services to more than 1,800 schools and associations of schools in the United States and abroad, including more than 1,500 independent private K-12 schools in the U.S. A big part of their work is diversity and inclusion. Part of my ISP was researching, and the statistics I found were disheartening. In a 2003 NAIS study pertaining to African Americans, they found that 75% of students said they had to make special efforts to fit into their school communities. 82% reported that they had negative experiences at their schools. 40% did not believe that the school treated all students the same. 67% reported that they had, at one time or another, wished they were in a different school. 70% believed it was hard for people like them to be accepted. 62% thought that they did not belong in their school. In 2000, within the coalition of the schools affiliated with NAIS, 82% of the students were white, 5% were black, and 12% were other people of color. So I discovered The Toast, an American anthology, humor, and feminist dividing website. On it, I found a blog spot written by Kendra James, a black woman who attended a New England boarding school. I thought that it was painfully accurate. The title is A Black Girl's Manual to Attending a New England Boarding School. And I'll be reading a few of the major points that hit home for me. Congratulations on your acceptance to our institution. Though we were founded in 1830, we only began admitting students of color in 1960. And to be perfectly honest, the first one was an accident. While certain rules apply across the board, this manual contains detailed information that will assist you both during and after your time with us. Best of luck and welcome. 1. On this campus, there was one very specific way to be black. It is difficult to articulate exactly what we mean by this, but you might simply describe it as being stereotypically black. If you're not sure how to interpret this, please take your cues not from your black peers, not from your family, community, or friends from home, but from the white students around you. They will be extremely helpful in letting you know what is expected of black students on campus. They will remind you with words and sideway glances that you should sit there in the dining hall at the black table. You should hang out with that group of friends, the black ones. You should participate in this extracurricular activity. The STEP team, which you should help to establish immediately if there isn't one, and you should only compete in that sport. Track and field, of course. 2. Though you will very likely end up with a white dorm mate, the school is only 23% diverse after all. We cannot overemphasize how important it is to remember that your friend group should mainly consist of those who are not white. White students are allowed to form friendships based on shared interests, compatible personalities, and other basic standards that must be met in order for two humans to spend any amount of time together. Black students will be expected to primarily form friendships with other Black students, and those Latinas who can't or choose not to pass as white through the challenge of shared minority struggles, though their perceived whiteness will vary from school to school. Be yourself with your friends and someone else with their white classmates. It will be assumed by your classmates that you have been admitted to our school via affirmative action and/or financial aid of some sort. You'll find that it's generally easier to silently go along with these assumptions. Correcting your classmates simply causes more confusion on their part. This is not their fault. It's difficult for anyone to attempt to alter their entire worldview for the first time in their lives. Silent agreement will save you the headache of explaining the truth multiple times. Tameka R. Jackson conducted a study and wrote a dissertation which learns about the lived experience of economically disadvantaged Black students attending predominantly white elite private boarding schools. She says that, quote, data were collected utilizing semi-structured interviews with 9 participants, with each interview lasting approximately 90 minutes. She goes on to say that Black parents are drawn to independent schools because they seek an environment that offers small student-teacher ratio, a sense of caring, and a perceived high-quality education. For many Black parents, the perceptions of independent schools are quite favorable based on the offering of superior resources, individualized attention, enhanced nurturing, and a somewhat better shield from negative peer pressure, drugs, and danger. This dissertation also talks about the outsider status that African Americans feel because they have to struggle to find a balance between the culture they were raised in and the school's culture. There is this fear that they will be ridiculed for acting or talking white. In order to develop a more racially inclusive curriculum, it is imperative that teachers receive training on white privilege, tools for cultural empowerment, and learn about the unique experiences of students of color within these settings. So she chose 9 Black participants who attended a predominantly white private boarding institution. They talked about their classroom experiences and how there was discomfort around the topic of race in the classroom. They also talked about this notion of being caught between two worlds, not knowing how to act with their Black friends, knowing how to act with their white friends. They also talked about their racial perceptions. So the notion of colorblindness were all the same. Racial discrimination. One student talked about how he was reprimanded because he and his friends, who were all Black, sat at one table at a formal dinner event. There's this pressure to excel because you're one of a couple of Black students at the school. And the socioeconomic challenges, sometimes not being able to afford things such as sports equipment. I interviewed 7 Black or African American students who currently attend a private boarding school somewhere in the Northeast. For this project, I'm asking them the same questions, and here are their stories. What made you decide to go to Westover?
I didn't get into my first choice, but I mean, I guess you could say like I liked Westover, so I'm here.
Describe your experience with white peers as a Black student attending your school.
I mean, when I first got here, there was a little bit of isolation. I mean, like, DC is very diverse, so, like, I never necessarily felt the color of my skin. I had, like, friends from, like, all over, and then when I got here, it's just a little different. Like, I don't know, it seemed like I had, like, I don't know, like, a mark on my back or something, like, something was wrong with me. And I mean, now, it's still, like, I have to, like, separate, like, my friends of color and, like, my white friends, but, like, it just seems like having to switch, you know, it gets tiring, but like hopefully when I get out of here it won't be like as noticeable.
Please don't hesitate to address concerns and changes you would have wished to see.
I think Westover could admit girls from like a little more different backgrounds. I think a lot of the girls here are the same. I think part of that is just because we have this day student population that comes from like the same types of families over and over again. But we have these diverse students of color, but we don't have diverse students in our white community, and it's like really sad because maybe if this was just an all boarding school, we wouldn't have as many problems. But it seems like when you come from a day student home, you come with like prejudgments and biases.
If you could change anything about Westover, what would you change?
I definitely like to see a more diverse faculty. That'd be really nice. I'd like to see a little more diversity among students, particularly with seeing maybe more students from the Middle East. I think we tend to get African American and Latino students from international countries, which is great, but there's some really good students right here at home, and I think maybe if we were in a better place with financial aid, then more students would come here. So, that's always nice.
Would you have chosen a different school?
I think definitely. It's my third year here, and same conversation over and over about like race and stuff. And I think at the all-girls school at home that I was looking at, this wasn't really a problem. I have cousins that go there, I have friends, and they've had a much better experience than I've had here.
What kind of microaggressions have you faced as a Black student in Gordon school?
If you wear like something on your head, it's like, what is that? Or if you have like curlers in your hair, it's like, what is that? Your hair is curly, it's like, what's the issue? It's like, you like can't get away with anything, and people are like, why don't you straighten your hair? Like, why don't you do this? Like, or even just like, if I'm wearing something that I think is equal to like something a white student's wearing, because of my body type, you're gonna tell me that I have to change. But you're not gonna tell the white student that she has to change because she's thinner, because she has skinnier legs. And like, it's just not okay.
What made you decide to go to Westover?
It's the only school that I got into that gave me enough money.
So describe your experience with white peers as a Black student attending your school.
It's kind of a new experience for me, coming from a hometown where everyone had the same ideas as me, so to come to a new place where not everyone thinks the same politically, socially, about, topics around social justice in America.
Please don't hesitate to address concerns and changes you would have wished to see.
I definitely think some of the students I go to school with have a certain way of thinking, but they still refuse to be enlightened in any sort of way. And communication-wise, it's kind of frustrating to explain to them in a calmly order without, things getting out of control because some people don't want to listen to what you have to say.
If you could change anything about Westover, what would you change?
I wish we put more of an effort on explaining how to do better as a community rather than, make things more mandatory so that, people's voices can be heard.
Would you choose a different school if you could?
Probably, yeah.
What kind of microaggressions have you faced?
Every time I go to the orthodontist, the doctor asks where I get my hair done or how much my braids cost, if he can undo one.
Thank you.
All right.
What made you decide to go to Westover?
To be honest, I actually thought of the school as my second choice because I had initially applied to Emma Willard and I was going to go to Emma Willard. But my sister was already here and my parents convinced me that it would be best if we were in the same place, so we could support each other. And that was my main reason for coming.
Describe your experience with white peers as a Black student attending your school.
It was a little interesting my freshman year. It was like they didn't know what was the boundary and I had to keep setting it for them. With my roommate, with you know, my friends, what they could and couldn't say around me, like what sort of jokes could be made. It was kind of awkward at first. But, you know, over time people learn or they just stop doing those strange things.
Please don't hesitate to address concerns and changes you would have wished to see.
This doesn't personally have to do directly with me, but I feel like a lot of students at Westover have gone through some form of, you know, like racial tension or aggression or something along those lines. And they either come up to me, other people, and they ask, well, who am I supposed to talk to? Because when I go and talk to the Raisin Center, they say, well, there's nothing in the handbook that says that we can do anything. And it's kind of confusing. Aren't you supposed to be the ones updating the handbook when things like this arise? Are you just going to leave the problem to stay stagnant in a school of 200 people where they're going to just keep popping up again and again? And it gets me angry because you can't use that as an excuse. You're the adult here. You're supposed to be leading us, teaching us what's right and wrong, not just letting the wrong thing pass by unnoticed.
If you could change anything about Westover, what would you change?
Personally, I would say that I would sort of change the way things are addressed here. If a student has a problem with another student, it should be the highest priority to get that fixed on both accounts. So not just, you know, shirking one student to the side and appealing to another student because they come from a different background or their parents have money or they pulled the pity card and started crying in front of you, which I've seen happen a few times. So I would say that you need to take into account the feelings of all students involved, and you need to realize that valuing every student is what's important in a school as small as this. Sorry?
Would you have chosen a different school if you could?
I mean, I don't usually like looking back on like my choices. I would say that if I were myself 4 years ago, I would have chosen a different school. But you know, I've come here and I've met all the people here, and I've gone through my changes, and I've come out completely different. And I can't really imagine myself in another school. I'd say it's too late for me, but I think I would have had interesting developments in my life no matter where I went.
And then what kind of microaggressions have you faced at Westover as an African American in a boarding school?
I mean, I guess you could say the usual stuff. Like, if I come to school with a new hairstyle, it's the discussion of the week. And not that that's a bad thing. That's, you know, similar things happen to everyone. But it gets to the point where people walk up to you and they ask in a hushed voice, how long did that take? Was it, like, terrible? Like, how do you do that? I mean, I understand curiosity. I do. But it's kind of tiring. If you really wanted to know, you could look it up online. I just feel like it's such a front. I don't know, it upsets me a little bit. And I've gotten this, it's kind of strange. This doesn't happen that much anymore, but people would sort of, after they've like gotten to know me for like a few weeks or a month, they'd like make these little comments like, oh, but you're not really that black. And I would be kind of like put back by it, like, what is that supposed to mean? I'm not that black. What does black even mean to you? What's your definition of black? And there's no way to respond to that. If I get angry, they're saying, oh, you're overreacting, it was a joke. If I don't address it enough, then I'm being submissive and I'm letting these people walk all over me. And so having to deal with that, I don't know, has been one of my biggest struggles at Westover. I can't stand it.
What school do you go to?
I go to Westminster School.
Okay. What grade are you in?
I'm a senior.
Woo! What made you decide to go to Westminster?
I thought Westminster was a good place for me as a student of color because it was small and I felt that I had a chance of rising as a student here and kind of just being able to create a name for myself and explore different opportunities that I feel like I kind of would have lost at a bigger school.
So describe your experience with white peers as a black student attending your school.
I think most of my interactions have been positive. There's a lot of like stereotypes that being like at a school like this as a black student, like everyone's racist and like
Right.
you know, I think a lot of it is false. I think there's definitely students that have been rude or like ignored me or made me feel kind of like left out, but for the most part, my interactions with students have been incredibly positive. I think most of my white peers actually want to learn about what it's like to be me, and I think they look at me and see that I'm different, and I think a lot of them either want to do that or they just kind of, they respect that. Yeah.
So please don't hesitate to address concerns and changes you would have wished to see at Westminster.
So I definitely think that my school could have, I feel like it decreased in the number of students of color they're admitting, especially domestic. I think they're boasting this huge international population, which is great. I think, you know, that's like the whole point of like globalizing, but they don't realize that there's intelligent people of color right around the corner that they're not including because they're, you know, fulfilling these quotas of like international students and like putting up flags everywhere, and you're like, okay, well, there's a kid from Brooklyn who's just as smart as that person and can use this more than that person. And that's like one thing I wish just would have changed. I feel like I've seen less students of color get admitted to here, and while we've grown, we have kids from like Russia and like Bulgaria. Like that's great, but we've, you know, we've lost like the American students that are just really that are losing this opportunity. Yeah.
Okay. So if you could change anything about Westminster, what would it be?
I guess I would change like where it is. This is like the whitest town you could ever be in. Like I kid you not, there's white picket fences on every house. Like I just feel like if this was closer to like, you know, a bigger town or like that had more like opportunities for students with like who are artistic, or who are interested in like the performing arts but are kind of afraid because you've got this huge lacrosse culture here. I feel like if we had like a bigger city environment or just like being closer to a city, we would be able to allow people to like do what they want and express their like their artistic abilities and like their you know, their interests in other areas.
And then lastly, what kind of microaggressions have you faced at Westminster?
Oh God. There's like the casual like telling me that it's like we're having fried chicken for dinner. And I'm like, cool, I don't eat that, so there's definitely like the, oh, I think the braids are so cool. But like doesn't your hair have to be dirty to have braids? And then they look at me and I'm like, there's definitely like the, oh, I'm like from the hood slide glance at me, or like wow, I wish I could dance, like, you know, like people who are ghetto, and I'm like, oh my God. I think that's like probably the most frequent and the most annoying, just like basic stereotypes, like third grade stereotypes. And it's hard when you get it from like teachers too. Like there's like, how do you dance like that? Like, I don't know, like it just, I guess I was born with rhythm. I don't know. It's hard. You get a lot of, it's hard when it's in a classroom and that's like supposed to be your study environment and people are like saying things like that. But that's probably like the worst of it.
Thank you, girl.
Of course. Bless you, girl. Do what you gotta do.
So what school do you guys go to?
Wilson Northampton School.
What grade are you in?
I'm a junior. I'm a senior.
Okay. What made you decide to go to Wilson?
For me, I came to Wilson because of my scholarship program, and they recommended, it was in my recommended schools list, and I didn't really have a say in the list of schools that they gave me, but this was a school that gave me the best financial aid package, so I said yes.
Okay. Describe your experience with the white peers as a black student attending your school.
So, I'll give you a little synopsis.
Right.
I would say that freshman year, and my experience here has evolved, my experience with white people at my school. But freshman year, I had felt a very large air of otherness being here and just feeling as if I wasn't, yes, and that people were just not very comfortable with my presence. They were used to seeing me in their classroom and on their campus and just in their everyday life. So it was an adjustment for both of us. And I mean, I would say it was harder for me, just because I was coming from a different culture and though it's an accepting school, people are still people and like, they're gonna just act on their instincts, and so they weren't progressive in that sense. Like, we're really progressive in other ways, but not racially. So that was my experience. And as I went through my 4 years and got more accustomed to being here and being with the people, it became easy. I don't want to say it became easier, but it just became more normal, and not so much of like an everyday struggle for me. And I wasn't like crying in my room because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't like people here, and or like they don't like me. Right. And so it's gotten better. It can always be better, and not everyone is going to change, of course, and people have their different backgrounds. But I would say, like, I feel that I'm more respected and more seen for who I am rather than what I look like. Yeah. Okay.
So when I first came here, like, I felt like an alien too, and then gradually they started getting interested in me, like wanting to see me dance because they thought, all black people could dance and all of that. And they would want to touch my hair because it was different than theirs. And then, actually now, I don't know if it's just the white people I hang out with, but they're just accepting and they want to learn more about me, like, and not be ignorant as they were in the past.
Please don't hesitate to address concerns and changes you would have wished to see.
I think that, wait, can you recognize like, who's speaking?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I'm sorry, I don't know how these things work. So, I think that like one of the biggest things that needs to change is that we need to talk about diversity or just differences from the beginning of the year, because we have Diversity Day, but we mostly just wait until around that time to start talking about issues. And we do have our club. We talk about that amongst ourselves, but we don't really, like, not everyone from the school is there. And like, in some of the meetings, every person in our student body is represented, but not often. Like, it's mostly black people who come. So I think like we need to start from the beginning of the year to talk about things so that people get more comfortable and they know like what is tolerated and what isn't tolerated, like how they should react,
Ask questions.
how they should, just general cultural sensitivity. Like we need that, and I don't even think our faculty has cultural sensitivity training.
They don't.
So we need that. That's what I would like to see change, because like just being educated is a huge step, and it like alleviates so many problems later on down the line.
So if you could change anything about your school, what would it be?
I think I would want to change, like, this is kind of hard, but like, I feel like the New England culture is just very cold, sort of.
Yeah.
And that, like, carries into the way people interact with each other, and sometimes, like, it might not even be race, it's just like, this is the New England culture and way of life. I would kind of, like, change that, make people nicer and more in front of each other. But, I don't know, because, like, sometimes I think that people, they don't know how to approach people who are different. So that kind of adds to it. I think I don't really know if that actually connects, but if people were more willing to speak to others and genuinely friendlier, then they might not be so afraid or like hesitant to talk to different people and not the same people all the time, or people who are like on their sports teams or whatever.
Would you have chosen a different school?
Well, yeah. I was supposed to go to a school in Georgia, but my older sister was at Wilson, and my younger sister was like, oh, she wants to go back to Nigeria. My parents didn't want to send me to like a school in Georgia that was like 2 hours away from home, because I have a house in Georgia. So they just dumped me here, and every day I like regret it, because I'm just like, maybe I should have just waited
because I would have been at a better school with like a better environment. Like, because when I visited the school in Georgia, it was just a nice place. It felt like home, sort of. I don't know. It's like a hard question for me. I think about this a lot too. Academically, I feel like I don't know. Like it was definitely a good fit for me, but I also always want to like challenge myself more. So I may have chosen a different school for that reason. But I think it's really good that I was exposed to all of this right now. Because I might not like. It's harder even. It was harder because I was younger and I was kind of just thrown into it all at once. But I mean, my program helped me, like I wasn't completely thrown in here. I knew some things to expect, but that was mostly just academically. Like they prepared me for that, but I didn't know what the social experience would really be like. And like, I don't know, so I would have liked that to change, but at the same time, like, it really helped me grow and like build my confidence a lot more. Like I'm still not, I don't want to call myself a confident person and like have my insecurities, whatever, for being here, but at the same time, I can like address them better and I know how to handle them and I don't, and like to not show them in front of everyone. So I think like it prepared me for the real world, which I need, and for college. So yeah, because of that, I would say. But other than that, how'd it go?
So what kind of microaggressions have you faced as a Black student in Williston?
I remember this one time after they announced like Proctor, the people who made proctorship, and like this girl told me that I got it because they needed a Black person in their like group of people. I don't remember that many, but like I don't know. It's hard to bring them up, but that one I spoke about. So another time, like when someone was playing music and the N-word came up, and then they said it like just unknowingly or subconsciously, and then like looked at me right away after saying it, and like obviously knowing like I shouldn't say that. It was kind of like in my early stages, so I didn't really know how to react, so I kind of just stared the person down, didn't say anything. But you know, now I would have said something. I didn't particularly like that.
Right. I mean, here, like, I remember earlier this year, a girl was like, to me and my friend Jordan, she was like, "You're gonna get into college because you're Black."
Yeah.
Like,
Someone said it. I can't remember who.
I was like,
yeah.
It's like affirmative action, like.
I know.
Thank you guys so much.
Of course.
There isn't any exact answer to improving the experience of Black or African American students in boarding schools. But through hearing these student stories, we can begin on the next steps. Here are my takeaways from this project. Schools should have immediate faculty and staff education on microaggressions, race relations, and cultural sensitivity. Schools should not only encourage, but also implement conversation on topics that are hard to talk about in the overall curriculum. There should be better diversity in teachers and students, and there should also be better disciplinary consequences for things such as racism, discrimination, etc. Such examples can be not letting students off the hook simply because they have the money and the means. Students should learn and reflect on their wrongdoings. Thank you for watching my ISP. This has been a turbulent journey that I am happy has come to fruition. I wouldn't have been able to complete it without the help from Eric and the people I interviewed. I hope that you have all learned and taken something away from it. Black and African American students are students too. They should not be responsible or feel obligated to be social justice warriors at their schools. They deserve to have a great experience at their respective boarding schools just as any other student would. No matter how little or how much they pay, how light or how dark their skin is, Black and African American students deserve the opportunity to shine and grow. To close my ISP, I will be reading a few powerful quotes from Black writers that I thought were appropriate.
Healing begins where the wound was made. Alice Walker. We are not fighting for integration, nor are we fighting for separation. We are fighting for recognition as human beings. In fact, we are actually fighting for rights that are even greater than civil rights, and that is human rights. Malcolm X. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. James Baldwin. Oppressive language does more than represent violence. It is violence. Does more than represent the limits of knowledge. It limits knowledge. Toni Morrison. Thank you again for watching our ISP.
Any questions? Thank you. All right, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Oh, really?
Thank you.
Oh.